Hello, everyone. It's Paul Kegabine with the Garland County Library, and I'm back again with Alison Crane, who's the Family and Consumer Sciences Agent at the Garland County Extension Service. And she's here on this extremely cold and bitter evening to talk about some bread making and do some demonstrations. So, hey, Alison, you staying warm?
Yes, we are, because I'm not going outside.
That's the smart thing to do. It's supposed to hit us here again in a couple hours, so stack it on top of what we already have laying out there on the ground.
That's it, yes.
Okay, well, welcome, and I'll let you get started.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here with everyone tonight. We've been doing advertising and promoting this, and we're actually going to do this a little different than what we've done before in the past. Again, my name is Alison Crane. I'm with the Garland County Extension Service. I'll share later in the program some of our contact information, things like that, so that if you have any questions later on, you can get in contact with me. But first, I want to just share, we're going to talk breads tonight, and in particular bread, quick breads. Now, we've done yeast breads, and I did a demo back in the fall on that. And so tonight we're going to do some quick breads, which means they don't need the rising process to bake, and so they're a lot faster to use. They're usually an easier recipe. You don't have to deal with yeast most of the time for any of the quick breads. And this is a great way to do some family baking. It's a lot easier for younger kids to enjoy the process. And I really recommend, as soon as your kids are big enough, little bitty kids can even show an interest in cooking. So I recommend starting them off with simple tasks, and through the process as they get older, then cooking. So hopefully, if you've already gotten your ingredients, you're ready to bake. But I'm going to share with you the list one more time. Here's what we're going to make. We're going to make a 5-grain whole wheat quick bread and an oatmeal whole wheat quick bread. That's kind of hard to quick bread and to say. All right, so here is the list. So I've got that available for you. Those are the things that you need. So if you haven't already gathered everything you need and you want to actually bake with us, now is the time to do that. Before we actually get started making our breads and mixing everything up, we're going to do two very important things. The first one is I'm going to turn on my oven, and I'm going to preheat my oven to 375. So that's one thing that you always want to do when you're baking. In almost every single case, you want to start with a preheated oven. So I've got that on. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wash my hands. So if you've got the family and they're going to be washing or cooking with you, make sure everybody washes your hands. My girls, when now that they're older and basically grown up, they all know if they're going to cook in the kitchen with mom to automatically pull their hair up and get it out of the way. I pulled my hair up. So we've got that in place. Now, hopefully, again, you've had enough chance to gather your stuff, and you can make one or the other. We're going to do two different things. We're going to go through them pretty fast to be able to get them both in the oven. We probably won't pull the last loaf of bread out during the program, but we'll at least get it in, and then you can finish baking yours as you get a chance. Now, Paul has shared the links to these recipes on the Facebook page or the web page. I'm not sure which one, but they're going to be available to you. And you can also contact me if you want me to just email the recipe directly to you. So we're going to go straight to the recipe here, and let me show you what we're going to get started with. Now, for the 5-grain whole wheat quick bread, you can use any kind of whole grain product, and I mean granolas, things like that. There's a lot of different things you can do. One of the things I wanted though was I wanted a cereal or a package of grain that did not have the added sugar, and granolas usually have a lot of sugar. So I found this one. It was Bob's Red Mill Old Country Muesli, excuse me, I always want to say muesli for some reason. And it's a whole grain, and it's hot or cold cereal. And it has a symbol on it that we're going to talk about later. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to measure out a cup of muesli. Now this one, muesli. I don't know why. Again, I think a long time ago, you know, at a glance, I saw it, the word, and I read it wrong, and now it's in my brain wrong. You can ask my family. I am always mixing up words and things like that. But I really like this, and you can eat this hot or cold, any way you want to with that. And I don't know if how well you can see, but you can see there's all kinds of goodness in that. Now, one of the things that we're going to do with this is it says to preserve about a tablespoon or so out. So I put a tablespoon out, and we just reserve that aside. On the directions also, it talks about preparing your pans, preparing your baking sheets. So I have baking sheets here, and I have already put parchment paper on mine. I just wanted to go ahead. You can also spray them with the oils, or you can grease them by hand, whatever you've got on hand. So we're going to start adding up all our dry ingredients here. So we put the cereal in, and we're going to measure out our flours. And we're supposed to do 2 cups of whole wheat flour. Now, if you're baking with the family and they're not very experienced with this, let's just talk real quick about what you do for measuring when you're talking and teaching your kids. So we're going to lightly scoop in and place it in my cup. Now, I have a 2-cup measuring cup here. You probably just have a 1 cup. But we're just lightly filling this in. And this is whole wheat flour. And we're going to kind of overfill it here. So it's above that. Can you see okay on that? And let me grab another one. I've got my knives. I've got 2 knives out. I'm going to use the flat side of a butter knife here, and we'll put that in. Then we have brown sugar, and we are, oh wait, let's do our cup of regular flour. I almost skipped it. I've skipped things before, and sometimes it works okay and sometimes it doesn't. So hopefully you've got your 2 cups of whole wheat, and you've got 1 cup of regular all-purpose flour. And then we're going to use a little bit more regular flour, you know, the all-purpose, for flouring our countertop here. And I set I put out a thing that a mat. I just like using those. All right, so now we get to go to the sugar. I was just all excited. Now, if you're watching your sugar, there's two sources, real sources of sugar. Now, the muesli has regular raisins in it, and this recipe calls for golden raisins. You can leave out the golden raisins if you don't want the bread to be as sweet, or you can reduce your brown sugar. Now, when you're measuring out brown sugar, you've got your measuring cup, and this is a dry measuring cup, and we're going to place sugar in there, and I'm going to start packing it down. And pull it here where you can see better. So I'm going to just pack it down. Growing up, I always thought brown sugar must be better because you got to pack in more. And so I always liked it. Of course, I like brown sugar in my oatmeal. And I like it too because you don't need as much. You don't have to use that much to sweeten something because it has more flavor to it. Okay, so I've got my sugar. All right. We're going to do baking soda. And so we need 1 teaspoon. Oh, I got every measuring spoon out but my teaspoon. So let's grab one real quick. Okay. So we're going to do 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And I like to always just kind of go in and chop it up a little bit before I measure it up. And then I also keep my box of baking soda. I replace them pretty often. It's cheap and easy on that, but I replace them because they absorb smells. So even in my cabinet, I keep it in a Ziploc bag, although I don't have it in right now just because I was doing that. So, and it's nice because you want to level, and so you can just go and reach right across there. So if you're doing this with your family, you can add that. And then we need our cream of tartar, and we're going to do a teaspoon of cream of tartar. Now, cream of tartar is one that you don't use this often, but you can use it fairly easy for a lot of different things. If you're making meringues or things like that, a lot of times it'll call for using cream of tartar to help it keep its stiffness. So I've got a teaspoon cream of tartar. Let's get that out of the way. Oh, I was going to say with the baking soda and stuff like that, the reason I always break it up and stuff is one time I thought I was so good at baking and everything like that that I did not get it broken up, and there was a lump. Have you ever had a lump of baking soda in something that you've eaten? Not too good. All right, and so this says salt, but my recipe is not sharing salt. Let's go back real quick. Oh, I didn't think there was salt in this one. I guess I have a typo in there. But I tell you what you can do. If you want, salt does add flavor. And so we can do like a ½ teaspoon of salt. I'm not even going to do a full teaspoon. That way, just in case it needs it. All right, so we've got this. I've got a nice spoon here. We're going to get this all good and stirred up. Now, this recipe makes either one really big loaf, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, but you know, it makes either one really, really big loaf. The original recipe called for just making one loaf that was supposed to be 7 inches, and my first time I tested it, I was like, that's turning out way more than 7 inches. So what I did the second time is I divided it in 2, and it actually reduced my cook time. And then one can be frozen if you're not going to eat it quickly or not. Okay, so we've got all this. So what we're going to do next is we're going to cut in our butter. So I have a stick of butter, and we're supposed to use a 1/4 cup. So we're going to use half a cup of butter. Yeah, half a stick of butter. I have somebody in the background correcting me. Okay. If you've ever seen anything I've done so far, you know I'm going to say it wrong. I think it right, but it comes out wrong. So I've cut it in half, and then I'm going to just cut it into smaller pieces. And we're just going to put that in there. How are y'all doing? Are you keeping up with me okay if you're making it in person or at home? So we're going to, now, if you are on a special diet, you can, there are some other, you know, stick butters and things that can be substituted. There's now like an olive oil butter, several different things that are available that have less, especially if you're trying to watch your cholesterol. So there's a lot of options now for that. But this is just a 1/4 cup, so it's not bad. So what you're going to use next is either a pastry blender or 2 table knives. All right. So the first, I'm just going to show you for a minute here using the table knives, because a lot of people, if you don't bake a lot, you're not going to have them. So what you do is you're just going to cut in the butter. You may have heard that term before. Well, this is where it came from. We cut in the butter. You can also use a food processor to cut in your butter, or you can use a blender, things like that. When I'm being lazy and we're going to do this really fast, and I've made this recipe several times for the family, I'm going to switch over to my pastry blender. But when I'm being lazy, I just stick it in the stand mixer to make it all blended in together and cut in my butter. So the goal is to get it where it's like sand. You don't see big lumps of butter in it. And this is a little harder to do because this cereal has all these pieces of whole grain, so you really kind of have to watch. So parents, if you've got a child cooking with you, then they may get tired of this after a little bit. So you can take turns while you're cooking. So, got this, and I usually like to run my hands in it to see how it feels. And this is pretty good. I see a few more spots there. Like I said, usually I'm kind of lazy on this, and I let my stand mixer do the cutting for me while I'm doing other things. I'm going to say that's pretty good. Okay. One thing about cooking is you got to get your hands in there. That's why you got to have clean hands. You're going to get your hands messy. So once we've cut in our butter, then we're going to add in our raisins. So we're going to do half a cup of the golden raisins, and you can use regular raisins if you don't have golden raisins. You can use, or you can, again, you can leave these out, especially because this cereal that I used already had raisins in it. But this makes a really nice sweet bread, and I want to stick together. And so the nice thing about it is it doesn't have to look good. Let's see if I can loosen them up here. Doesn't have to be exactly half a cup. You can add more if you like them. So so we're going to stir those in. And we're going to just set that aside for a moment because we have another task to do. So we're going to, and you know what I did? We got to put in 1 egg. So I always crack my egg into a separate bowl and check to make sure that there's not any shell. Because, you know, as I was growing up and learning to cook and stuff, that was another thing I learned the hard way to do. So I've got my egg, so I'm going to put it in my bowl here. All right. And now we're going to measure out 1.5 cups of buttermilk. And this is a low-fat buttermilk. This is non-fat. So this is really nice because this recipe, even though you've got some butter in it, it's really not a high-fat recipe. And I had already shaken this, so I really like using buttermilk in a lot of different things. It adds a lot of flavor. You can make a really nice ranch dressing just from scratch. So we've got those. We're going to beat that together, and I'm just using a little whisk here. So how you doing? Are you being able to follow along so far? We're going to talk, once these are in the oven, we're going to talk a little bit about whole grains and why it's important for us to eat those. Okay, so I've got my wet ingredients, my liquid ingredients. Now I'm ready to add them to my dry ingredients, but the recipe calls for me to take out about a tablespoon. I'm going to go ahead and take out 2 since this is so creamy, and I'm going to make 2. And you won't feel the lack of it for the thing, but we're going to set aside a little bit of that egg buttermilk mixture because we're going to use that and we're going to brush it over the top in a minute, and it's going to make a really nice crust on our bread when we bake it. So let's get this mixed in. Now my recipe on the screen here is a little more simplified, I guess you could say, than what I give more details in the handout. All right. So We're going to go get this mostly mixed here. We just want to kind of get everything mixed. Can you see it? It's kind of crumbly. Trying to get as much of that loose stuff at the bottom because we're going to want that. This is like my favorite thing. It's just a flat spatula. I picked this up in Romania, and it's hand carved, and it's like my ultimate favorite. Okay, so I'm going to put this aside for a minute, and we're going to take a little bit of all-purpose flour and just sprinkle it on here so that it won't stick. And I'm gonna make it where my loose stuff that's still in there goes right on top. And set all that out of the way. Okay, so we're gonna scrape that right off. You got to get your hands messy making bread. But one of my favorite things, I find making bread therapeutic. And one of my favorite things about bread is feeling it become dough. You know, it goes from this kind of sticky, ooey gooey mess, and then it changes. And that gluten starts to do its thing and form that structure to it. And it's just very satisfying. So we're gonna need this. It's really pretty sticky. So you may have to keep adding as you go. So knead it good here. And make sure everything is all mixed in together. So again, if I want a big loaf of bread, I can just leave this as one loaf and place it on my parchment paper. But I want a smaller one that's going to cook a little faster. So I'm just going to take my butter knife I have here and just split this in half. Okay. And I'm going to shape it and place it. Can you see it? On there. So mine is going to be a little bit smaller. It'll be a little bit smaller. It's closer to 6 inches across.
Hey, Allison.
Yes, sir.
Can you maybe adjust your camera down a little bit? Someone in the comment says the closed captioning is blocking your cooking view.
Oh, I
forgot it was generating that automatically.
My fingers are a little bit on the nasty side. There, if you come on that side, there is a little bitty rolly thing. It's right there.
Ah, okay. Let's see. That?
Yeah, and you just kind of scroll down with it.
Okay.
Is that better, Paul?
I wish moved just a tiny bit.
Maybe a little more. I can't see the closed captioning on my end since I'm on the behind the scenes, but
okay.
I think that may be all the way down.
Yeah, and if anyone's watching, just let us know if that.
All right, it's okay if you cut off my head, or I can just squat down. Okay. Well, hopefully that gets you on that. I'm glad you're watching. Okay. Now, obviously, our hands are pretty messy after that, so we have to wash our hands again. And this process, does take a little bit. You got to get that sticky, gooey stuff off. Make sure it's out from under the nails. But again, it's worth it. Because, like I said before, I really like the change in the texture. I like being able to feel that and see. So you can see, so I've got 2 here, and again, you can have it at 1 or 2. And we're going to take a sharp knife, and we're going to score this. Now, on the second recipe we do, we're going to do a fun shape with that, but you can do a fun shape with this. Like if you're doing this with your family, you can do that. So if you're going to score it, I'm going to score it with X's, but you can make a smiley face in it, draw somebody's initial or whatever. So we're just going to cut across, and you want to cut about 1/4 of an inch deep there, just across it. So parents, if you're baking with your kids, this might be the thing that either you have to help them with, and you help hold that knife, or you just do it for them unless they're big enough to handle a knife. You know what your kids are capable of doing. I will say that giving kids an opportunity to use knives, there are lots and lots of kid safety knives and things like that you can start them out with. And then you also teach them to respect knives and what they can do. And honestly, you have to keep your knives sharp for them to be safer, especially for a young child who doesn't have the strength and they're trying to push and stuff. So now we're going to take that mixture that we set aside, the egg and buttermilk, and can you see, hopefully, we're going to just pat that all over. And I've got, just a little, there's all kinds of little paintbrush-like things, pastry brushes that you can do. I've got several different kinds I use, several sizes. But what this does, this gives it a nice crust. This is also what you do for like making scones and things like that. And so it's amazing what a nice texture that gives to your crust. And you don't want to overdo it, but just get that all on there. Okay, so now we have that reserved amount of cereal. Here's where you have some options. You can sprinkle this on the top or not. I will tell you this, I'm going to take out, there were just 2 raisins in with that, and I'm going to take those out and just set them to the side, because I found out the first time I made this, the raisins on top kind of just got burnt, toasty, and I didn't really like that. But now, parents, I will say this too, sometimes kids don't like the cereal flakes and things like that on their bread. So if you find, hey, they're not willing to eat bread that has stuff on top, maybe they don't like the texture of it yet, then leave it off. And like when you're purchasing a whole wheat bread, you might keep that in mind when you're shopping for whole wheats. But I do like the crunch that this creates on the top. So, and it's nice in this bread because it does all the different pieces. Like this cereal has almonds and sunflower seeds and everything that the original recipe called for. And so I was like, oh, this is great. And it gives it more texture and stuff later on when you're eating the bread itself. Okay, so we're going to stick this in the oven. And set a timer for this. And I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna set it for 20 minutes just to see what it does. Okay. So give me just a moment to reset. Now, if you planned on making the oatmeal bread with me, give me just a moment here to reset this. And then we'll have a space. I really, really, really like that. I got this for Christmas. My husband got me this. I'm really happy with it. Can you tell? It's been handy. I've used it multiple times. Okay, so I've got this cleaned up. Normally, you know, again, I would be baking one bread or the other, but we're going to do it since we're trying to do everything fast. So let's go to our next recipe. This one's fun, and this one is something you probably have the more of the ingredients on hand on a regular basis if you eat oatmeal and things like that on a regular basis. So I'm an oatmeal Saturday mornings. That's my oatmeal time. So the first thing we're going to do for the oatmeal is we're going to measure out 1 cup of oatmeal. And so I always just try to pour. You can spoon it, but for time's sake. Now, the nice thing about oatmeal is, again, you don't have to have this just perfect with it. It's going to be fine. Especially, with this recipe, I find that I have to add flour anyway, so any flour. Now I have my blender over here, and so for just a moment it's going to be really loud because, and I don't know, Paul, if you can mute me or not when this starts, but the first thing you do, the oven is already preheated and I've already got my baking sheet ready for it. Again, I'm using parchment paper. It's just so nice for cleanup and everything. So you can use a blender or you can use a food processor. So just make sure, put the lid on. Okay, so I've already plugged this in, so it's going to be loud. Okay, let me stir this real quick. Now, I use the old-fashioned oats on this, but you can use the quick oats, and if you just don't want to blend them up, then you don't have to. But it's fun. And again, this is something that with parents, you can do. Kind of gives a child a chance to see how a grain becomes a flour. And you can shred this up to whatever texture level you want. So I'm going to pour this into, and it always wants to get down in the bottom here. So put those in there. Okay. All right, so we'll set that aside. Just remember, safety for that. Kids, listen to your parents. If you're baking with us, you know, mom or dad know whether you need to handle that or not, because those blades are sharp. Okay, so we've got our oatmeal. So now we're going to combine our whole wheat flour. So we need 1.5 cups of the whole wheat flour. So we're using that measuring process where we kind of aerate, basically, you could say, the flour, and then we just lightly drop it in there. The reason we do this is to keep from packing it when we're making a recipe. Our recipe calls for us to do an even spoon. If we were doing it by weight, then it wouldn't matter. We could just weigh it out. But most of our American recipes call for measuring cups. And for bread, it's not as important to be super accurate, but for cakes, some cookies, some of those specialty items and stuff, it is pretty necessary. Okay, so now we need our baking powder and salt. So baking powder's in the round cans. And again, I always do where I like to stir it up, make sure there's not any lumps, and then you have that nice edge there for leveling. 1, 2 teaspoons, and that's our leavening agent for it. Then we're going to put in 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And you can put less if you're trying to watch your sodium. You can put less. But when you do it out for slices and stuff, it adds up to very little per slice. So we've got this ready. I'm going to stir that up. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside, and I've got a bowl here. So we are going to do one. This was kind of odd on the recipe. The original recipe called for 1.5 tablespoons of honey. Well, I have a measuring spoon that is 4 teaspoons, because 1 tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. So if you have to do 1.5, then you do 1.5 teaspoon to equal that 1/2 tablespoon. So I'm using a 4 tablespoon here. And I'm going to put my honey. And so what I'm going to do to cover that 1/2, I'm going to just be generous. Because again, you have to be 100% accurate on bread. So all I have to do is just kind of let it kind of overflow just a smidge. When you're measuring with these, this one's nice because again, if I wanted a regular tablespoon, then I would just, there's my little extra. If I wanted just the tablespoon, I would just go and measure it out to, there's a little line in this thing. But if I wanted the 4 then I can do that. I'm just kind of scraping out as much as I can of that honey, because I have to admit I'm a honey fan and I really like that. So, okay, we want to get this in the oven, and hopefully that other one will be out before we finish. So we got enough of that, I think, out. No, there's some more. Okay, then we need another tablespoon of oil, and vegetable oil. I'm using canola oil. You just, any kind of vegetable oil will work. If you have a special dietary need, you can just use whichever one you regularly use. You can also use olive oil for baking this because it is a little bit sweeter. You wouldn't want to use one of the heavier ones. You would want to use an olive oil that is for baking. All right, so we're going to mix that in. And this was the first recipe I'd ever had that it said dissolve the honey in the vegetable oil. But by going ahead and doing this before you add the milk, it does make it easier. So then we have 1 cup of milk, and I got 2% here because the family will not drink 1% or skim milk. I do use it for cooking and stuff, but I figure, you know what? They cut fat in a lot of places. If they'll drink their milk this way, we'll do it. So set that back to the side. So we're going to put this 1 cup of milk in here and stir that. And so we want to get that all nice and integrated together. Move these out of the way. And like I said, I've got the one bad thing I've noticed with that is the milk stiffens the honey too. So that's probably another reason that they do have you do it that way. All right. So we're going to take that and we're going to combine these. And it makes a pretty sticky dough, which is why I mentioned that you know, flour, you'll have the extra flour. Okay. And so you can see right here, that's pretty sticky. So what I do with that is I just add a little all-purpose flour to it. And also I'm going to put all-purpose flour onto my pad here again, pretty generously, to make it where it's not so sticky. And you can just kind of, you know, if you don't mind stick, you can just dump it straight onto your baking sheet. But again, I want to be able to shape it some. We'll go ahead and put it on here. As you can see, it's pretty sticky. We'll put some on top and pat it down. We're not going to knead this. We're just kind of using a little bit of the flour to form a nice ball. Because we're going to make fun shape out of this, we need it to be firm enough that we can handle it like it would be Play-Doh. If you've been to the library lately, this month, you might have seen my little demonstration of it in the display case. Okay, so this is firm enough now to be able to handle. So I'm just going to kind of make it into like a log for a moment. And we're going to just kind of squeeze off about a third of it, maybe about half of it. Okay. And we're going to make that where we can put it on our. Now you have an option here. If you're going to make a shape, then and have some fun with it, then you start with one round, kind of flattened. All right. And we're going to take the rest of these and just kind of roll it just a smidge. And I'm going to cut it in half, and half again, and half, half. Okay, so we have 8 pieces. And then you can roll them like a ball. Or if you want to make a sun, you roll them like your ball. And then you're going to make like a little raindroppy looking thing. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with the ball, and I'm going to put it right up against it. And we're just going to place these around, and we're going to make a flower. Sometimes when you're trying to get kids to try new foods, it helps to make a fun shape. So it also is a good thing, and I'll share that in my notes in just a minute. It also is a nice thing to get them in the kitchen, and they're more likely to try something if they helped make it. So we're going to place these around. All right. So what you kind of have to do is you kind of have to press them in. So that they're firm together. All right, and you can see we've got a flower. Now, if you're really just happy with it, then you can cut in a little face and make a little smiley face flower. So I'll give my little nose. I'm even going to give this one eyebrows. So, and you got to press them in fairly deep here. You may have to put a little bit of flour on the tip of your knife. I'm just using the butter knife for this. So I've got my flour face for this, and it's going to take 20 to 30 minutes. The original recipe called for baking at 425, I think it was. But because we're changing the shape of it by doing the flowers and stuff with it, you want it to bake at a lower temperature and not bake as fast. with that. So, where you end up with really, you know, this outer edge, you know, gets really hard and crusty. So I heard my timer going, my warning. Let's see what this is doing. Oh, it's looking pretty good, but it's not ready yet. So I'm going to try and get both of these in here. Let me turn this. Oh, it's smelling really nice. Now I would put this on my top shelf, but my top shelf, you know what, I can do it that way. Sometimes my top shelf burns. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. Okay, so that first one is going to need probably about 5 more minutes or more. And the second one, I'm going to set a timer on my phone. And I'm going to go ahead and set it for 20 minutes to check it. What I'll probably do is move it down once I get the other one out. Okay. So let me just share just a couple more things while that's baking and finishing up. Parents, grandparents, you know, I want you to think about what you are teaching your kids about healthy living and making choices that will help them take care of themselves when they're older. Where are their role models? And so we have to make good decisions, good choices and things like that. And, you know, sometimes we think that, oh, well, healthy eating is too expensive, things like that. But it's really becoming a lot easier to do now than it used to. So especially with the Extension Service, we have a lot of options and low-cost things. But here's some key things that you need to consider. This is the recommendation from the CDC with making your grains. You want to eat half of your grain foods, like your breads, your pastas, things like that. You want to make half of your grains whole grain. Now, we used whole wheat flour today, but there are other whole grains that are available. In fact, I've got a bunch pictured in this. Whole grains use the complete grain kernel. Now, you can see in this picture that looks like the white rice, that's the processed white rice. But, you know, if you try brown rice takes a little longer, but you get some really good nutrition out of it when you're making it. Or quinoa. I'll tell you a secret though. I had quinoa in a bag in my cabinet, and I reached to try to pull it out, and it hung on something else and put pressure, and so I spilled quinoa in my cabinet the other day. It looks like little bitty tiny pieces of birdseed before it's cooked. I'm still finding quinoa, and that was like almost 2 weeks ago. So be careful with your quinoa or any other whole grains that are in your cabinets. That's just Allison's little tip for the day. All right, whole grain foods though have more vitamins and minerals and more fiber than the refined grain foods. All-purpose flour is a refined flour, where the whole wheat is not. I mean, you can even look at it, you can see it's, you know, it has color to it and stuff. And a lot of times I just stick in a little bit. I tested the other day something, I don't even remember what it was. Dumplings. I made dumplings and I put partial whole wheat flour in it, and it actually had a really good flavor. It added more flavor to it. Here's some whole grain tips. Read the label for the term whole wheat or whole rice or whatever it is. So if you are looking for your breads and things at the store, you want to look for the whole on the label. When you look at your ingredients, the first thing it says is whole wheat flour here. And the same thing for this. This is a whole wheat, 100% whole wheat bread, which if it says 100% whole wheat, that means they did not use any of the regular flour, the all-purpose flour type flour, the processed. They just use the whole wheat. If you start with your kids when they're young, my kids have always eaten the whole wheat breads, whole grains and things like that. And now as grown-ups, that's what they go for. They've tried the white breads and things like that, and they're like, Mom, they stick to the roof of your mouth and they don't have any flavor. So, I did something right with them on that. Avoid enriched or refined grains, like even with the flours and things. All right, so our timer just went off. Let me check this. It's getting there, but they're not quite ready. Because that's such a heavy dough, you really want to make sure it's baked all the way in the center. And so that's one of the reasons I'm giving it more time. Okay. If you have a favorite recipe that you use with your family, it could be cookies or anything, a bread that you make at home, pumpkin bread, anything like that, you can put in some whole wheat substitute, some of the regular flour with whole wheat flour, and that adds a little more fiber and stuff. I did a whole wheat pizza crust the other day where I did half and half with the pizza for the pizza, and they were delicious. Then they were gone really fast too. And again, if you start your kids off young eating whole grains, then they're going to prefer that. Ways to encourage them: bring your kids to the kitchen as you cook. Again, my kids, they've been in the kitchen with me since they were little bitty. As soon as they were big enough to stand on a chair beside me safely, and even sometimes, they would sit on the counter beside me. We've always cooked together in the kitchen. And so now that they're, even when they were teenagers, I could say, oh, I need somebody to cook for me, or can somebody come in and start doing this? Then they can do that. Kids are more likely to try things that way. And fun shapes like our cute oatmeal bread, which you can also sprinkle bits of the oatmeal on top. Now I want you to look at this late picture here on it. When you're purchasing your breads or other foods and things, look for that whole grain label. This one has it right back here on this. This one's a whole grain oat nut bread, and it's got 26 grams of whole grains per 2 slices of bread. So, a sandwich would give you that. And it's got some great stuff in it. Also, the first ingredient listed is the whole wheat flour, not an enriched whole wheat or something like that. You just want regular whole wheat. The same with this one. The first ingredient is whole wheat flour with it. I bet these are about ready. Now, we'll be able to take them out. And I'm going to share this while I'm getting that. So that's how to contact me Tell you what, before I take those out, I'm going to stick these back in there out of the way before I forget them. Okay, get those out of the way. And we're going to see what is happening with our bread. It could go in a little bit longer. I'm going to move this down. And that one too, with the oatmeal one of the things we could have done is wiped a little milk on it too. All right, but can you see what a pretty loaf that is? And if you thump it, let's see, let me get a fresh one. This is very, very hot. So parents, you're the one handling those. We're going to look at the bottom. Oh, it actually toasted too much there on the bottom on that one. I think because it was a little wetter than I made before. All right. But, or it may have been lowered in the oven. So you've got this. You're going to let it cool just a little bit. Then you can start slicing it. So I'm going to transfer these to a baking rack. So we'll transfer those to a baking rack to cool. And the oatmeal bread is not going to be done in time to be able to show you how it came out, but you just want to keep an eye on it because again, you've got smaller pieces and then you've got your center. So, and depending on if your oven bakes evenly, you may need to turn it partially halfway through. Okay. So Paul, if we want to that's all I have on my slides. If there's any questions or anything?
No, last call for questions if anyone has any, but I thought it was pretty straightforward and easy to follow along with.
Well, if you do try it, I would love to see a picture of what you made in your comments, in the comments section, because you can go back later and share that even after the program's done, and or send them to me on my at my email, which is acrane@uada.edu. If you are familiar with the Cooperative Extension Service, you know we are part of the University of Arkansas System, the Division of Agriculture, and you may be used to us as just UAEX for our emails and our website. But we have switched that, and we've changed our domain name this week to the website is now uaex.uada.edu. And again, our emails have switched over to the UADA. But feel free to get in contact with us. And we're probably not going to be in the office much this week because of all the snow, but you can email or catch me through our website or on Facebook, which you can like us on Facebook, follow our Garland County page. It's just Garland County Extension -UADA or Garland Extension Home Life, which is my family page where I put all kinds of healthy tips and things like that.
Thanks, Allison. And same here. And a surprise to no one, the library building is officially closed tomorrow. The snow's coming here soon, so everyone stay warm and stay safe. And if you have any suggestions for anything on baking you'd like Allison to host in the future, let her or I know, and we'd love to do more cooking shows like this.
That's it.
Have a good night.
Thank you.